الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان.
Assalamu alaikum friends, Miraj Mohideen here. I'm so excited for you to join me on this journey. This is Revelation Kids. We're going to go through the entire Sirah, the story of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, from beginning to end, especially focusing on the 23 years of his prophethood. I'm going to give you some more instructions about the workbook as we get into it. But for now, I want you to sit back, relax, and enjoy Qur'an Year 1. At first, you might not believe. At first, you might not believe. That's how every real journey begins. Not with confidence, not with a drum roll, but with surprise. The kind that catches you off guard, so you're not even sure if it's real. Let me tell you about a night that changed everything, and the man it happened to. He wasn't looking for power. He wasn't looking for fame. He was actually just looking for quiet. Muhammad lived in Mecca, a city of heat and dust and noise. Imagine the marketplace, merchants calling out prices, camels groaning under heavy loads, people arguing about money and pride, poets standing on corners, boasting about their tribes, their families. Everyone seemed to be chasing something, gold, attention, even fame. But Muhammad didn't chase those things. Something inside him felt unsettled. Not angry, not restless exactly, maybe, but maybe more like a quiet ache. Questions were stirring in his soul that wouldn't leave him alone. Questions like, why do people bow to statues made of stone? Statues that cannot hear them, cannot help them, cannot love them? Why are the poor stepped over as if they don't exist? Why does the world feel so far away from the way it should be? These thoughts followed him everywhere, in the marketplace, at home, under the stars. And so Muhammad began doing something quite unusual. He would leave Mecca. Not forever, but often. He would walk out of Mecca, past the last houses, and climb into the dry, rocky mountains that surrounded the city. Higher and higher he would go until the noise faded below to nothing. He would go until he reached a small opening in the rocks, a narrow cave called Hira. It wasn't grand, it wasn't even decorated. Perhaps the walls were rough to the touch. The ceiling was so low that he had to duck to enter. But once inside, the world went still. No merchants, no arguments, no boasting. Just the sound of wind brushing past the rocks and his own breathing. Steady and calm. He would sit there for days on end, sometimes even longer. He would be thinking, he would be wondering, he would be meditating. His wife Khadijah understood his need for quiet. She never complained about his long absences. Instead, she would restock him with barley, dates, and water so he could stay even longer, because she knew that whatever was stirring inside him needed space to breathe. Perhaps he looked out the night sky at the stars scattered across the darkness and felt deep in his chest that there had to be something more. These stars couldn't all be out here for no reason. They couldn't be out here by chance. Something had to have created it and arranged it in such a beautiful way. Muhammad didn't know what was coming. He had no idea that Allah, otherwise known as Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, had been watching over him his entire life, preparing him for this very moment. Allah is the one who watched over the Prophet when he was an orphan, when his father died, then when his mother died, and then his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, and then he was watched over by his uncle Abu Talib. All throughout his life, Allah was watching him, preparing him for this very moment. One night, the cave felt different. Perhaps the air was more still than usual. Perhaps the stars outside seemed sharper, brighter. Muhammad sat in the darkness, wrapped in his cloak, breathing slowly. And then, without any warning, the quiet didn't slowly fade. It stopped. The cave felt full. A presence, enormous, overwhelming. It filled the space around him. A figure made of light. It was an angel, not just any angel, but the greatest of all angels, Jibreel. Before Muhammad could speak, before he could even move, Jibreel took hold of him and squeezed him. Not gently. The pressure filled his chest, pushed the breath out of his body. Then Jibreel released him and spoke a single word. Read. Muhammad's heart was pounding. His voice barely came out. I cannot read, he said. He wasn't a scholar. He wasn't a poet. He had never been taught to read or write. He was a shepherd, a trader, a man who thought in caves. Jibreel held him again. Then the same overwhelming pressure, tighter this time, until Muhammad felt like there was no space left inside him. Then Jibreel released him. Read, he said. I cannot read, Muhammad gasped. A third time, the squeezing, the pressure, the release. And then, like water pouring from a mountain spring, the words came. Not written on paper, not carved in stone, but placed directly into his heart. Read, in the name of your Lord, who created human beings from a clinging form. Read, and your Lord is the most generous. Muhammad didn't just hear these words. He felt them deep in his chest, as if they had always been there waiting to be unlocked.
اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى.
These were the first words of the Qur'an, the very beginning of revelation, Allah's message to the world, delivered through Jibreel to this beautiful man sitting alone in a cave. And it wasn't a calm moment, it wasn't gentle, it was powerful. And if I'm totally honest with you, I think it was a little bit terrifying. When Jibreel disappeared, Muhammad was trembling. His hands must have been shaking and his breath must have been short. He stumbled out of the cave into the night air. Imagine him standing there on the mountainside, the sky enormous above him, the city far below, and a feeling inside that was just too big to understand. And so he ran. Down the mountain, perhaps his sandals slipping on loose rocks, perhaps the cold wind stinging his face. His legs carried him faster than his thoughts could follow. Because when something happens that is too big to hold, you go to the place that feels safest. He didn't go to the marketplace. He didn't go to a friend's home. He went to his home, back to the loving arms of his wife, Khadijah. He burst through the door, shaking, breathing hard, his eyes wide, and saying, "Cover me," he said to his wife, "Khadijah, cover me, cover me." Khadijah didn't panic. She didn't ask 100 questions. She didn't tell him to calm down. She did what people do when they truly love someone. She wrapped a blanket around him, held him close, and waited. See, Khadijah had trust, the kind of trust that doesn't need answers right away. The kind that says, "I'm here, take your time, I'll be here for you." And when Muhammad's breathing finally slowed, when his hand stopped trembling, he told her everything, the light, about the squeezing, the voice, the words. And then he whispered something that tells you just how shaken he was. He turned to her and he said, "What's happening to me?" Was he afraid? Perhaps. Was he afraid of the angel? Or was he afraid of what all of this could mean? Was it real? Could it be true? Could someone like him be really chosen for something this enormous? Or is he simply going crazy? And this is the part you should never forget. Khadijah looked at him, this man she had known for years, this man who fed the poor and cared for orphans and never told a lie. And she said to him with steady courage, "By Allah, Allah will never disgrace you. You keep good relations with your family. You speak the truth. You help the poor and the destitute. You entertain your guests generously, and you assist those who are struggling with their burdens. She didn't laugh. She didn't doubt him. She didn't hesitate for a bit. Khadijah was the first person on earth to believe in Muhammad's message. And it wasn't because she saw the angel or because she heard the words. It was because she knew the man. She had faith in Muhammad, and through him she developed faith in Allah. But Khadijah didn't stop there. She knew that Muhammad needed more than comfort. He needed clarity. So she took him to see her older cousin, a wise, learned man named Waraqah. Waraqah was old. His eyesight had faded, but his knowledge was sharp, and he had spent years studying the scriptures of earlier prophets, the stories of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and so many others. You might know their names as Ibrahim, Musa, and Isa alayhi salam. Maybe some of you have those names. Waraqah knew all of these stories, and all the other prophets who had been chosen by Allah. Muhammad told Waraqah what had happened in the cave. He told him about the angel, the pressure, the words. Waraqah listened carefully, and then he said something that made everything clear. This is the same messenger that came to Musa. Waraqah was talking about Jibreel, the same angel with the same calling and the same beginning. Waraqah was telling Muhammad that this was not his imagination. This wasn't a dream. In fact, this was revelation. It was real, it was true, and it was heavy. Then Waraqah said something else, something that shook the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He said, "Your people will turn against you." The Prophet could barely believe it. My people? They will drive me out? Prophet Muhammad was loved by everyone in Mecca. He couldn't imagine his people driving him out. Waraqah replied, "Yes, no one has ever brought what you have brought without being treated badly. If I was still alive till that day, I would strongly support you." Waraqah knew he was entering the final days of his life, and he would not be able to be there to defend the Prophet. From his words, it was clear that the road ahead would not be easy. But the Prophet was not alone. Allah had already begun to surround him with people who believed. This is the story of Qur'an Year 1. At first you might not believe. This is the year it all began, not with confidence, but with uncertainty, not with power, but with trembling hands and a racing heart. Every hero's journey starts this way. Before courage there is fear. Before clarity there is confusion. But here's what makes a story so beautiful. The Prophet did not have to believe alone. Khadijah believed for him, held that faith steady until he was ready to carry it himself. And that's what heroes do, not just the ones who receive the calling, like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, but heroes like Khadijah, who believe in someone before the rest of the world catches on. Tonight, we met our heroes, and the journey has only begun. Because tomorrow, something even harder than fear arrives. Responsibility. What does it mean when Allah chooses you, and you're not sure you're ready for the task? That's what we'll talk about in Qur'an Year 2, that you are the chosen one.
إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون أولئك أصحاب الجنة خالدين فيها جزاء بما كانوا يعملون.